Congrats, you just booked your flight to Zurich, Geneva, or any other city in Switzerland, and you want to know what things you should know before coming here, or maybe you're just at home wanting to learn something about Switzerland. Anyway, it's your lucky day. I'll be telling you about 10 things you should know when traveling to Switzerland. Let's go. Before getting started, if you have any questions about Switzerland, let me know down in the comments and I'll try to answer them as good as I can. Alright, let's start with number 10. Number 10. Switzerland is expensive. Surprise, surprise, Switzerland is the most expensive country in the world. Back in 2020, a magazine called CEO World compared costs of accommodation, clothing, groceries, transport, and other things between every country, and Switzerland was ranked first in that list, just in front of Iceland and Japan. Especially groceries and dining out are expensive and can cost you a fortune when compared to other countries. When you go eat at a restaurant, don't expect to pay less than $20. An exception to that are fast food chains. And a big meal with a standard steak can cost you up to $50. So ordering a starter, a main dish with a steak, a dessert, and some wine can easily cost you around $100. Looking from my perspective, as Swiss citizen, eating out is quite expensive. That's also the reason why the Swiss often go with a vegetarian option or leave out the alcohol completely. Also, real estate, so renting or buying a flat or house, is very expensive. That also counts for booking a hotel or an Airbnb. Expect high prices. The cheapest you can get away with is by staying at a youth hostel or at a friend's place. But not everything in Switzerland is expensive. Here are some examples of what things are cheap compared to other countries. Number 1. Education. The state funds public schools through taxes, so getting basic education is free. For example, primary school and secondary school, which is 9 years of school. And Swiss students don't really have to go into student debt like they have to do in the US. Number 2. Electronics. We have low taxes on them, and there is a fee for disposal of the devices already in the price included. And example number 3. Taxes. We have lower income taxes than most other Western countries. But still, Switzerland was awarded the most expensive country in 2020 and most likely still is in 2021. Number 9. Switzerland has 4 official languages. It's nothing unusual to hear multiple languages daily when traveling through Switzerland as a tourist or as a citizen. Around 60% of Swiss have German as their main language. We don't really speak the same German as our German neighbors in the north, but we have different Alemannic dialects. Those dialects change throughout Switzerland, and someone from Bern doesn't speak the same dialect as someone in Zurich, and there might be quite big differences. But still, we understand each other most of the time, and I repeat, most of the time. Good luck understanding this guy, for example.
Dan is de kaas stolen en de kaas mogen nog gewoon hebben.
Around 20% of Swiss use French as their main language, predominantly in the western part of Switzerland, along the border to France. And close to 10% of the people use Italian as their main language, mainly in the southeast of Switzerland. Last but not least, the 4th and most unknown official language is called Romansch, which is mainly spoken in the mountain regions in the east of Switzerland, and that only by around 0.5% of the population. Romansch is closely related to the spoken Latin language of the Roman Empire, mixed with a bit of Italian and a bit of German. It's very common for Swiss citizens to speak 2 or 3 languages very well, and most speak 2 of those 4 national languages, plus adding English to the mix. Number 8. People are reserved. When first coming across people who grew up in Switzerland, they can come across very reserved. We are definitely not as welcoming and warm as our southern neighbors from Italy. When going to a shop or a restaurant, it's very uncommon to have extensive or any small talk at all. When you go to the United States, it's very common to hear phrases like, "How are you doing today, sir?" which never happens in Switzerland. Swiss shopkeepers and waiters are usually very efficient and to the point. This is also one of the reasons why here in Switzerland, it's more difficult to find friends when you move here, for example, from another country. People don't usually get to know each other, for example, while partying or so. It's much easier to find friends while attending a school, a course, or while practicing a hobby. But let me tell you, if you befriend a Swiss person, he or she will be your friend pretty much forever. Number 7. Drinking water from taps and fountains is totally okay. If you arrive in Switzerland, drinking water from taps or fountains is totally fine. The water quality is amazing because it usually comes from underground sources, which are protected by law. There is a special sign that tells you if water from a tap or fountain is not drinkable, and the sign looks like this. So, whenever you come across a tap or a fountain, you're good to take a sip or fill up your water bottle. It's not only good for the environment, but also for your wallet, because traveling in Switzerland is already expensive enough. Number 6. Tipping is not mandatory, but still appreciated. Tipping in Switzerland is not as common as, for example, in the United States. It's not a must in Switzerland as the service is already included in the price. However, if you like the food or the service was especially good, tips are obviously appreciated. Usually, people leave around 5 to 10% of the bill or just round up a few francs. Number 5. Public transport is widely spread. When traveling through Switzerland, a car is only needed to get to very remote areas. You can get around the country by trains, buses, city trams, or even cable cars. And there are many other ways of transport in Switzerland. Most Swiss big cities don't have a metro, but they all have a big net of trams. Download the SBB app, it looks like this, on which you can not only find timetables of when your train or bus might be leaving, but also you can purchase tickets on there. I personally use another app called FairTiq, on which I can just swipe once when I get on public transport, and I can just swipe back once I leave public transport. This app then automatically calculates the best ticket for you. I can recommend this app to anyone wanting to avoid going to the very complicated ticket machines that we have in Switzerland. Not even Swiss citizens properly understand them. Download FairTiq in your app store today and use this code when signing up to get 3 francs off of your first ride. That's literally 2 Red Bulls or 1.5 Toblerone bars. Number 4. It's a small country. Switzerland is the 135th biggest country in the world. It's just a tiny bit smaller than Denmark and the Netherlands. You can fit Switzerland into the United States 227 times and 414 times into Russia. Even though it's pretty small, it's still 3.5 times bigger than Jamaica. Driving times with either car or by public transport are rather short if you compare them to the US. To get from Zurich to Geneva, the 2 biggest cities in Switzerland, it will take you around 3 hours by car or train. Number 3. Switzerland has a lot of emergency shelters. For the rare case of war or another emergency, a lot of Swiss citizens will be able to fit into emergency shelters. Shelters were built all across the country. When constructing literally any housing like apartment blocks, hospitals, schools or malls, one or multiple emergency shelters had to be built in the past. There used to be an article in the Swiss law which made it so every time you built a building of any kind, you had to build a bunker. Roughly 20 years after the end of the Cold War, in around 2015, Switzerland erased that law. In case of an emergency, a lot of these bunkers are still operating. In the mountains, there are a few bunkers who are built for hundreds of people, but their location is kept secret from the public. Number 2. Switzerland has better chocolate than Lindt. When I meet someone from another country and I tell them that I'm a Swiss citizen, oftentimes the first thing they talk about is that they love Swiss chocolate. And they mostly go on to say that the best chocolate they've ever tried is the Lindt chocolate, probably the most famous Swiss chocolate brand there is. From the perspective of a Swiss person, I have to admit that I'm not the biggest fan of Lindt. Lindt has a great reputation, not only outside Switzerland, but also in the eyes of most Swiss citizens. Their company image suggests good quality, great flavor, and fair wages. And don't misunderstand me, Lindt used to have great quality, and in some products they still do, but that was when they still produced all of their chocolate handmade, or at least partially handmade, and they didn't try to push the production costs down as they're doing it nowadays. There are other chocolate factories who still make their chocolate by hand. They might be more expensive, but the extra cost is totally worth it. One example is Lederach. I'm a big fan of the chocolate they make. If you want my personal recommendation, you should go to Lederach and get the hazelnut milk chocolate. It's amazing, I promise you. Number 1. Switzerland wasn't neutral out of choice. When a Swiss person says, "We are so neutral because we're just such nice people," they're definitely lying. Thank God, I'm here to tell you a bit about history and how this neutrality came to be and why it's still one of the key factors of Switzerland. The one very important event you have to know about is called Congress of Vienna. It took place back in 1814, 1815. Before that Congress, the Swiss, or Helveti, how they were called back then, were just a whole bunch of warriors, and they were fighting as mercenaries in different wars all throughout Europe. They were guarding the Pope, as they're still doing nowadays, but also the royal family in Paris. At that time, Napoleon, the former French emperor, was bringing war all over Europe. After Napoleon was defeated, representatives of the great European powers of that time came together for the Congress of Vienna. 2 Russians, 2 Englishmen, 1 German, and a guy from France. There was also a Swiss delegation who waited outside of the room. During the Congress of Vienna, they tried to bring back Europe into a state of peace by readjusting borders, international laws, and to bring back order. To sum it up quickly, the great powers decided to redraw the Swiss borders, enforce their neutrality, but also give them independence. But why? What were the reasons for those things? Well, there are multiple. Number 1, they wanted Switzerland as a buffer zone in between the great powers. An independent but neutral Switzerland was, in their eyes, the key to that. Number 2, the Swiss had a reputation to be good at fighting and didn't hold back to go to war. The great powers made sure that Switzerland would not increase its land masses by putting them into a treaty of neutrality, though they were still allowed to be armed. After the neutrality was put into action, the Swiss didn't actually take it seriously and went to war again. It was only during World War I and World War II that the Swiss took part in actually being neutral. Ever since then, being neutral became one of the specialties of Switzerland, which is still true to this day. Alright, that was it for this video. Let me know down in the comments which of the 10 things you're most surprised about. Make sure to like this video and to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching and see you the next time. Bye bye.